Okay. All right. So that we want to welcome everybody. This is what we hope is going to be kind of a series this year on election payroll. We know things have elections over probably the past 4 years since 2020 and the world closed down. There's just been some kind of a struggle with what the processes need to be, and the volume of people that we're hiring and things like that, and when like absentees and things came up. So we've been trying to kind of talk about those issues. We've went to the auditors and we've had those discussions about election payroll to them, and then we've presented to the clerks. But this time we thought we would bring you together and come at it from a little bit of a different perspective. So the plan for this series, as we're going to do today's, we would like to come back after the primary and do something on the same lines, but maybe a conversation about what worked, what we're still kind of struggling with, maybe some ideas and kind of a flow process. And then we thought at the end of the year after the general election, maybe come back for a third time and see if we can kind of all get on the same get the same kind of flow, right? To make it a little bit easier for both offices, because you guys both as auditors and as clerks have lots and lots of duties, and it's easier to do those duties when everything really kind of works well together, right? And there's maybe no confusion. So we're hoping that this will help facilitate that a little bit. As of for today, the flow of today is we have a presentation. So I'm going to share that with you. We're going to go through some slides. We have reached out to both associations, and we have, again, had 3 counties graciously offer to help us with this. We think maybe hearing from your peers and how things work in their counties, how processes are done and things like that might give you ideas to help institute in your counties as you need. There's not really a one size fits all here. Some may do things very similar. Some may do things, a little bit differently. It doesn't make one better than the other. It really needs to come down to your county and what works best for you. Okay. So as we're going through the presentation, I will stop. We'll ask some questions. These counties, and we're talking about Hancock County, Jay County, and Stark County, have all been given the questions ahead of time. So we're going to let them kind of speak about their processes. They'll each speak maybe 4 to 5 minutes, something like that for each one. And then we'll move on to the next slide, next question, and so on. Again, as you have questions, there's the chat. You may enter any questions inside there, or you, again, can email us as we go through. So with that, we're going to go ahead and get started. I'm going to share my screen, and hopefully this works. Can you see it? Everybody see it? Okay. All right. So as we get started, I can't click through anything because I can't find sorry, there we go. Okay. So we're going to start again talking about some election payroll. These slides should look fairly familiar to both groups. They've been kind of used before. There's been some stuff, maybe added or fleshed out a little bit as we go through. So as we kind of get started, I wanted to just kind of talk about election workers again, right? These are, again, specialized group of individuals. You're hiring them to come in and perform that service in connection with the election. That is their primary purpose. If you go to IRS, the IRS does have requirements on this. It is actually a very educational information that they have on election workers, reporting for them withholdings. So I included the link here. You can also look in statute. Statute talks about election workers in 36637 being independent contractors and such. And as we go through this, election workers, that's still included in your county budgets, some of your salary ordinances, things like that, okay? Today, we want to focus on just a few of the areas. So we're going to kind of talk about small part in budgeting, but we're going to talk about hiring, who's actually working these, taxes that are paid from here, payment for the services, how that's done, and then reporting at the year end with the IRS. Okay, so I'm not going to read through all this. This is statute. I just wanted you to be familiar. Your election budgets that are done are going to be in kind of different places within the budget, right? Sometimes the commissioners are going to budget for some of the expenditures that are made for that. Sometimes the election board's going to prepare some of the budget, part of that budget as well. So it's just kind of a nice place if you're thinking about the budget. There's many statutes here that affect it. And so I just kind of wanted to give you a reference for that. So getting into kind of the nitty gritty of the presentation, we're going to kind of start with hiring election workers. So when we're hiring election workers, when you're hiring them in, especially like poll workers and stuff, there's no need to put those kinds of election workers through onboarding, right? They're not, they're only there to do that. The training that they will be receiving will be provided by the election board. They have to train them on the duties and things that they're going to be doing during that election. But as far as watching like the internal controls video, things like that, there would be no need for that. They're not taking in any money. They're not doing any of those kinds of duties. It is strictly for the election, okay? And so this is kind of where we wanted to start our, our table of our counties and talking about processes. And so I think we're going to do this alphabetically. I think we're going to start with Hancock. And so our first question is, Hancock County, how do you work together during the hiring process? You guys can unmute.
I will at least.
Yeah, since it starts with our office in getting I have some feedback here. I'm not sure what's going on.
I do too.
Stop sharing.
Okay. Deb, should the one not
I'm going to mute.
Okay. Okay. That seems much better. Since it starts with our office, once our party chairs provide the list of workers to us, we go through and Deborah's office and myself, we've come up with 2 worker packets. So one worker packet is for a returning worker, someone who we've already gotten all the information, I-9s and all that information from, and then returning workers who all they need to do is confirm that their bank information hasn't changed since they're paid by automatic check. So not check, I'm sorry, automatic deposit. So we provide that list. We send out the packets to the election workers. The election workers are to bring their completed packets and any documentation to our training session. And Deborah's office has someone show up at each of our trainings, and then our election workers check in with them before they come into training to be sure that payroll has everything that they need. And I'll let Deborah take it from there.
Okay, well, at that, I think that's probably the biggest part of our process was working with the clerks to make sure that we work together to be able to collect the information. And we do run the majority of our election workers through payroll versus AP. And this has worked very well for us. We don't have any accidents. Somebody's worked more than $600 an hour flipping it to payroll. I think that just that process alone of getting that started is really the key component of what we do. Sherry, is there anything that you want to add?
I would say this is payroll clerk. It's nice that we are at the meeting when they come for election training because we can answer payroll questions for these election workers in real time. They've brought their documents back and we can communicate.
And we know right then and there if there's an issue, if someone's direct deposit hasn't, it's not, they don't have that listed or they didn't bring their I-9. So we know right then and there if there's any kind of issue and it gets corrected and they go about their training, and it's worked very well for us.
Okay, we have a couple questions for you guys before we move on to the other. Do you do this process for like all your absentee workers and the election day poll workers?
Yes, it is all workers that go through this process. We sometimes do combined trainings, so election day or absentee. And so everyone goes through that process.
Okay. And the other
The
question
only-
I have, oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say that the only individuals that we really don't run through payroll would be, like Lisa has pointed out, a 16-year-old that's just working one day that's going to make $50. We do run them through AP, just to be clear on that, and that's only, and they don't do a lot of the whole I-9s and all of that. So the
Okay.
W-99.
And then the last question I have for you guys before we move to Jay is, says that their auditor requires a new W-9 every year, even for a veteran poll worker. Do you follow this as well?
We do not. We have.
That's an AP question, and our payroll and our AP systems do not communicate. So that means that they're running their claims through AP.
Okay. Did you want to add anything, Lisa?
We don't require a new one every year.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. We don't require it every year for returning workers. They're just confirming their previous information. And as Deb said, claims versus payroll with that question on the W-9.
Okay. All right. So with that, I think we're going to switch over to Jay County. We're going to, like I said, welcome Emily Franks and John Eads. Can you tell us, you guys work together during your hiring process and what that looks like?
Okay, I'll start. When I hire, not really hire, but when I get a poll worker that's going to come in and do early voting, for example, I would first send them right up to the auditor's office to get everything signed up and get the paperwork filled out. Now, we do have a lot of repeat people that we don't have to re-sign up because they're already signed up. But then they do their part with the auditor, and then the auditor gives them a handbook and then they don't, like you said, they don't have to go through the training because they don't handle money and that kind of stuff.
So yeah, it's really decided. I think even before the election, John kind of has his list of who's going to do early voting, and then everybody that doesn't do early voting does not meet that $600 requirement, so they're run through claims for us.
So the only poll workers that I have on payroll are the ones that do early voting and make over $600.
Already employees, yeah.
Our current employees, yes. Because I have a lot of current employees, and especially in my office, that work election day. Unmute. You're muted. We couldn't hear you.
Sorry. Thank you for telling me that. I thought, well, it's kind of awful quiet. What paperwork do you guys require to set them up in payroll?
Okay, so it's the traditional paperwork. They need an I-9. They need to fill out tax paperwork. They'll get a handbook and sign off on that. But the only thing we don't require is they're not doing an internal controls or insurance or anything like that. I mean, it's it's a few forms.
Okay. All right, and with that, we'll switch over to Stark County and talk to Rachel and Bernadette, and maybe they can tell us how they work together during their hiring process.
I just killed her. Oh my gosh, I think I unmuted you before you said that. I hope you didn't hear what she said. So we are kind of similar to Jay County. What Bernadette does is she gets the list from all, the
county chairs.
Yes, and then she'll go through to determine which people are going to be early voting, basically which people are going to be making over $600. That's really what she's looking for.
Which is the ABS and the satellite. We're a vote center, so it's the satellite boards as well, because we usually have 6 to 8 days of satellite voting at $110 a day, which puts you over the $600.
Yeah, and for the $600 mark, she also takes into account the fall too. So if she thinks that some of these are going to be coming back to work in the fall, and that might put them over 600, she takes that into account. So the employees that are going to be making over 600, they come in and they do the onboarding process, everything except drug testing and then the internal controls video. But all the other tax paperwork, I-9, all that stuff they do fill out. But everyone else that she doesn't think that it's going to be making over $600, we put through actually the claims process. So
Okay.
we don't require like what she gives us on the claim provides all the information we need to pay out that claim. So we don't provide, or we don't need in my office anything additional on those people until we get the claim.
I sent her a whole list of the vote center. If they're on payroll, I'll make a note on that sheet. Don't pay on payroll or something to that effect. And of course, the total and the claims will have the worker's name, address, phone number, anything on it that they need to be able to be on payroll. And if they want automatic deposit, then I tell them during training that they need to go talk to the auditors, give them their bank information so it can be automatic deposit instead of waiting for a check to be mailed to them.
Okay. We do have a couple questions that have come in, but I'm going to hold off on those because we're going to kind of talk about those here in just a few. So I'm not ignoring you, but we haven't quite got to them just yet. Okay. So as we talked about hiring process.
Ricky, I'm sorry. Do you mind if I interject one more thing about our process? Bernadette mentioned that their early workers are paid a flat sum. Our early workers are paid hourly. So that was another reason why we thought that the payroll process was better, because we have some workers who might go from one center to another center and they're filling out an hourly pay sheet or time sheet. So that's another reason that we treat them all the same. Just wanted to throw that out there.
We have a lot of repeat individuals as well, so very few make less than 600.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. Sorry, I have to look at her screen to make sure you guys can see what I'm seeing. All right. So as we kind of move through this a little bit, kind of want to talk about, who is working. This is really important because, obviously when you were trying to find election workers, sometimes you're using county employees, right? That already are on your county employee or county payroll. So you've got, deputies from the clerk's office. Sometimes you have deputies from other county offices or just other county employees. And sometimes you have other elected officials who then come and work the election. But then you also have the people who are not county employees. Again, this, typically ends up being, I think, more poll workers and stuff for the most part that work that primary and election days. But you do have some election workers who work multiple days, up to and after the primary and the election day that are not county employees either. Okay, so kind of knowing whether they're a county employee or not a county employee is really important as you're going through this whole hiring process. What my next question is are your processes and procedures different for your county employees versus your non-county employees? And if so, how are those differences addressed? Hancock, we're going to start with you.
Okay. Actually, our processes and procedures are not different, except internal controls aspect of their packet, and their W-4 isn't mandatory for the election worker as it would be for our regular employees. So everything else would be basically the same because we do a onboarding with all of our new employees, just like we do with the election poll workers.
Lisa, do you have anything you want to add?
I think Deb said it all. I don't really have anything to add to.
Well, that's a good thing. Okay. How about Jay County?
To you.
Okay, we don't put anybody on the payroll, so they're not considered an employee if they make under $600. And we look at it that if they're going to work both elections, will they be over $600? If not, then they are not even considered an employee. But regular employees and then the election workers that work early that make over $600, they would be put on payroll, and they would be only treated differently as they don't have to watch the video like we discussed before.
Okay.
And then taxes would come out and that kind of thing.
Okay. So what about your employees that already currently work for the county? Do you do anything different with them? I mean, they're already set up in the payroll system, right? Because they're already working for the county. But when they do the election, is there any differences that you do for them?
And the ones in my office, sometimes they would rather have comp time instead of getting paid because it is a holiday. Our county's closed that day. So my office, I allow them to take comp time. Now we do have another county employee, a couple of them that work for me, but they just go in through payroll and then taxes come out.
Okay. So you just kind of let, Emily know, hey, these two are going to be working the election, and then she does something on her end.
Correct.
Ricky, can I just add?
Yeah.
We also, the only difference that we have is for an election worker that's also a county employee, we do have two payroll records for them. So
okay, so you keep them separate. Like this is their other,
Yes.
this is their original payroll, right? Like this is what their job is, and then you have like an election file for them.
Absolutely, yes. So
Okay.
just wanted to
That's
point that out.
Okay. Emily, do you have anything to add on your end from the auditor's office?
I don't think so. We're pretty similar to Hancock, and it does go on a separate election voucher for us as well. So
Okay.
pretty similar. Pretty similar.
Okay, so you just kind of sit, once he lets you know, like an county employee's working, then you mark it somehow so that you know that there's going to be additional compensation paid to them for that election work.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. All right. How about Stark County?
So we don't require anything extra for employees that are working the polls. That just is, she'll just add that to a payroll voucher when it's turned in. We don't need anything from them ahead of time. And then how we do it is we actually create an event in payroll and pay them through an event.
I don't know what an event is, but I trust that you do. We will talk about that one here in a few too. Again, and we're reading through your questions, and as we kind of get there, we'll address some of these. Okay. All right. Okay. So we've kind of talked about those. Election workers can be county employees, and they can be non-county employees. Okay. The next thing, and this I think is one of those things that just kind of got asked. We're going to move on to. Make sure. Sure. Yep. Okay. We are going to move on to taxes. Everybody loves taxes, right? Oh, hold on. Sorry, we had, Rachel, quick question. Is the event when you talked about the event, do you use LAO?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, we'll come back to that one too. Okay, sorry. Am I still sharing? Yeah. Okay. All right, so let's kind of talk about taxes. So when they receive election worker compensation, it is something that I'm going to use the word taxable. So like at the end of the year, when they are filling out their taxes, they do have to say, hey, we earned this money. It is, however, not subject to any kind of income tax withholding, right? So there is kind of that little, just like kind of that little difference. Where you kind of get into it is the Social Security and the Medicare. So the FICA, this is only going to apply to election, when the election workers' compensation is more than the threshold amount. I do not know what the threshold amount is this year. I want to say it was 2,000. I don't know if it has changed.
2,300.
Has it changed to 23? I should have looked that up, so I apologize. So once it hits that threshold, okay, then every tax dollar or every not tax dollar, every amount of compensation that they've earned would then have to be paying Social Security to Medicare. Okay, so you kind of have two options here, and this is kind of where we kind of talk about the payroll versus the claims kind of thing too, right? If you've got somebody who exceeds that threshold, then you can either withhold that FICA on every dollar they earn and refund that election worker if their compensation never makes that threshold. So if the threshold's 2,300 and you've got somebody who's working both the primary and the general, and they really only get paid out, let's say $2,000 at the end, the county would then have to issue them like a refund for any of that FICA that was held, right? It's because they're not quite sure if they're going to have to do it, so they want to make sure it gets paid. If you don't do that, on the other hand, and you say, I think they're only going to make 2,000, but they make 2,500, at the end, the county is going to be liable for those FICA taxes due because they paid that individual over the threshold amount. Okay. So as we're talking about that, it kind of leads me to my next question. And the question is, which process does your county use in regards to the FICA? And why did you decide that that was the best method for your county? Hancock.
Deb, I don't mind to
Okay.
start with this. So when Deborah and I talked about this a few years ago, because we used to separate early workers and election day only workers between the payroll and the claims department. Problem is the payroll and the claims department processes don't talk to each other. So if you're paying by claim, her AP or claims department is processing that, but there's no connection between that processing and the payroll. So you don't know if somebody worked election only in the spring and then in the general they work early and election day. They could certainly hit that threshold, but since claims and payroll systems don't talk to one another, then auditor wouldn't know that it might put them over that. So that's kind of why we push to make everybody on payroll, and of course it's voluntary for the income withholding when they complete their W-4 form for the payroll department. And as far as processing and reporting at the end, that's an auditor question, not a clerk. So I will defer to Deb.
Okay, so I'm just a little off of where what am I responding to at this point?
What process does your county use in regards to the FICA? So do you run them through payroll to do that and then refund anybody, or do you wait until you think and then try and go back and collect it?
We do run them through payroll, and then we would issue a refund if needed.
If needed. Okay.
Or if applicable.
Okay. We did have a question that came in, and this is just really in general, but I wanted to make sure before we move forward. The question is, does the threshold include county wages for employees? Yes.
No. Oh, it does?
Yes. If you have a county employee who is working.
Oh, a county employee.
Who is working for the election, they've already surpassed that threshold. Okay, so they would be paid through payroll no matter what they were doing, even if they were just a poll worker. Okay, because they've already surpassed the threshold. Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to move to Jay County. and ask the same question. Again, the question is, which processes does your county use in regard to FICA, and why did you decide that was the best method for your county?
Well, for all the excuse me, for all the early workers, they will make over the $2,300 maximum minimum. Sorry, and then they will be coming out of payroll. Now, I do have this year 2 early workers that will make over 600, but they're only going to work 2 weeks each, so they won't do have to pay that because they won't do the $2,300 threshold. So I will let Emily know ahead of time so that she can make those adjustments before they get paid.
Okay. And
then, of course, all the election day workers don't get paid through payroll, so we're okay there. And in an event, I have someone that worked only election day in the spring, and then all of a sudden I'm going to use them for early voting in the fall, then we'd have to go back and make up the FICA tax to them.
Okay. And so you guys do kind of look at it to see where it falls at some point. Yes. And make that adjustment that your original assessment was correct.
Correct. And we haven't had to do that at this point, but future, you never know.
Right. Okay. Emily, you have anything you want to add?
Same. I think just communication and John letting me know things ahead of time has really been what works for us.
Okay. Rachel, Bernadette, Stark County. How do you guys process it?
It's kind of, this just goes back to how she divides up the individuals in the beginning where they're, what thresholds they're going to be at. And that's how we either pay them through claims or payroll. If the people that are under that threshold are, not going to reach that, she doesn't think that it's going to reach that threshold, then we'll pay through the claims process and no taxes get taken out.
And taxes always comes back to the worker. It's up to them. If they make $601 or whatever the threshold is, it's up to them to take their, keep track of their money and pay the proper taxes on it.
I did have a question came through that this could be open to anybody who, any of the 6 of you that would like to answer, but how do you know to refund a poll worker should they not exceed the threshold? So if you're running a poll worker through payroll, and I can't remember if any of you are, is there any way that you would signal, hey, they didn't make that 600, we need to refund them?
For Hancock County, that'd be a manual process, just like an audit, and we would be able to determine that at that point.
Okay. Or the threshold too. I mean, if they don't meet that threshold, not just the 600. So you would go make some sort of assessment after the fact to see what you've paid them to determine whether or not they made it. And that process could look different from county to county. I don't know if your systems would allow you to, I don't know if you could code them a certain way and print them, and be able to look. I'm not sure what your systems would allow, but as long as some sort of assessment was done at the end to show, hey, they didn't meet that threshold and we withheld that FICA, we need to refund that to them. Hopefully I've answered.
We had a question come in. What happens if regular employees hit overtime because of election work?
Ooh. Okay. So how do you treat it if regular employees hit the overtime?
For us, we do an event. So overtime is a different section. For us, I would not include the hours worked on election day as election work time, and that's going to go into overtime. They're going to get a certain amount per day, and it's going to be an event, and that's how it's paid.
Okay.
We would see in Hancock County, we would see that basically as a different job. If I had my transfer deputy decide they wanted to work election, that would be 2 separate jobs. So they would not receive overtime as a county employee while making money being an election worker.
Right. Okay. I'm going to make sure I'm good on questions. Okay. All right. So let's talk about payment to them. Okay. So when we're talking about payment to election workers, this can be kind of done a couple different ways. You know, you've kind of heard some of it as we've talked about. There is the PRE2 statement of expenses of the precinct election officer. So workers that on election day are specified on that form. So you would submit that for payment. Some are just done like on the Form 17 claim, the regular claim that you send in. Those are for, you know, could be for any workers that are not included on the PRE2 form. And then again, you could run it through a payroll claim as well. So those would be the 3 different forms of claim that we would have submitted to be paid out. When we are in there looking at it, you know, even from an audit, we're going to look that it must tie to the amount that was approved by the appropriate board. You know, obviously your election workers, the determination of their pay is actually, it can be different from position to position as it's set out in statute. We're also going to be looking for an appropriation, right? So as you're filling out your budgets for elections, we're looking that there is an appropriation set for these election workers. And so as it's paid, it's still staying within the budget, not going above. And that any changes to the compensation that are being made through this must be approved by the appropriate board, okay? So as we're talking about this and during this claims process, my next question is, how do you communicate to everyone to get everyone paid? What difference of opinions might arise during this process, and how do you work to make a compromise on it? Hancock.
Well, when I submit my claims, we use our pre-2 statement of expense, which gets attached to the payroll voucher. And then I also prepare a separate spreadsheet that has every worker's different pay, whether it's early, it's training, payment, meals, of course, go separately through the claims department, and what their hourly rate was, overtime if they earned it, which some of our election or our early election workers do earn the overtime. And then I also attach a copy of our resolution as to at what level election workers are paid. And that gets attached to that, whether it's a payroll voucher or a claim. I attach that to every claim so that they, the auditor's office then has their documentation on how poll workers are to be paid. Poll workers and ABS boards are to be paid. And then we just submit it all through that payroll voucher with the appropriate documentation attached. And if there are discrepancies, Deborah and I just talk it out. She comes to my office, I go to hers, and we figure it out and move forward.
I don't know if Deborah wanted to add anything.
No, I guess I just cannot say enough how much communication is key. I mean, it's just a different perspective sometimes. We don't understand what capabilities each office has or doesn't have, and what laws affect the clerks versus the auditors. So it's real important and just to have a dialogue, because for a long time I think a lot of people don't realize that AP and payroll don't communicate, just for an example. So I think that just being able to communicate and sit down and just say, hey, well, I'm not saying you have to do this because I want you to. It's because we don't have the capability of doing this or that. So I think a lot of times, I mean, Lisa and I are very good at just communicating and saying, I'd rather this or I'd rather that. And we just get it taken care of. So please communicate.
Communication is definitely key as we're working towards getting everybody paid. Okay. So John and Emily, what about you? How do you guys communicate with this? And if you guys had a difference of opinion happen, how do you guys come to some sort of compromise?
Since I'm in my 8th year, probably my first couple years, there were some issues that I was still learning the process. And but now I turn in the PRE2 with everybody that's worked. And on that PRE2, I also include their training that they attended. which was we pay them $10 to come for a training class, and then we pay them a $20 meal allowance plus the wages for the day. And we don't pay by the hour like Hancock County. We just pay by the day. And then that's all included on my PRE2. Now, if they're an employee, it gets turned in on a election payroll form for anything that they've worked to get paid.
Okay.
And like the auditor there from Hancock County said, the communication is absolutely the most important thing in all of this.
And then once all that paperwork gets to our office, we do look at like the fee schedule. Payroll and AP sit down together and make sure that if there's an employee that they're getting paid for their meal, and we kind of do it that way. And then if we have any questions, we will take that back to John if we see anything.
All right. Rachel, Bernadette, how about you guys? How do you guys do this, your process to get them paid and communicate it? And what happens if there is a difference of opinion? How does it get resolved?
I start out with one Excel spreadsheet. Sorry, excuse me. With each worker of each vote center. So each vote center has the inspector, the clerks, the facilitators, and I use that same spreadsheet in different ways. When I send it to Rachel, I will put the amount of money they get for training. Each vote center gets to choose whether they get the $35 for their food per person or it goes to a caterer. That's chosen by the inspector of each vote center. We only have 7 vote centers, so it's a little easier for me to manage the 7, but that will be on there. The $25 they get for training, because if you're going to listen to me talk for 2 hours, you deserve at least $25. And then the pay, whether you're an inspector, a clerk, a facilitator, if it's the lead facilitator, that has to come back to the courthouse on election night, they get an extra $10. So it's all broken out on exactly what they're going to get paid. And then they have a total, and that's what Rachel pays. And then if the worker is an employee, then I put it on my election payroll. And if not, then it goes on a claim. But that same Excel spreadsheet will go, and I will highlight the ones that are employees so they know that when it's connected to the payroll, that those are the employees that are supposed to be on there. And then the ones that are highlighted, because usually we have very few employees that are working on election day. So when I turn in my claim, the ones that are highlighted, I will make a little note, employee on payroll. So they know that that's not to get paid on the claims process.
Yeah, I agree with everything she said. Sorry, Ricky, we're both a little loopy. Our sewer backed up in the annex building, so it kind of still smells bad inside.
Well, we're glad it's virtual and not there with you. Okay. I think what I'm hearing though from all of it is you guys all kind of, when you get something and you have a question about it, you're coming to the other to make sure that each understands where the other one's coming from, and then try to resolve those so that obviously the individual gets paid, right? And correctly.
Yep.
There's a few times that I've messed up and put an employee on claims and a claim on payroll, and thankfully Rachel and her staff have caught it before it's went any farther, and she'll call me and say, "Hey, you messed up again."
Well, good. We like when the dialogue works, right? Okay. We're doing really good on time. Oops. Okay. All right. And so the last thing I kind of wanted to touch on the presentation is reporting. Okay. So, you know, we talked about that threshold earlier, and that threshold that we think is 2,300 is really for your FICA, right? Your Medicare, your Social Security. That's a little bit different than when we're talking about reporting, okay? So reporting, there are no requirements when they only work the election and make less than $600, right? So you hire somebody off the street to come and do your poll worker, they make less than $600, then there is no reporting requirements for that, you know? So a W-2 though is required when you have somebody who comes off the streets who works the election in some capacity and makes over $600, or if they're an employee. Okay, so if they are an employee of the county, they already get a W-2. This should all be included, right? Because compensation's compensation. So even though they're working the election, they already have their county job. So they've already went over the $600 because you have to combine the two of them. Okay, so that amount of money should be included on their W-2 and reported. And the same thing would go again as if you picked somebody who was a non-employee off the street and they worked the election to make over $600. Okay, so as we kind of talked about this reporting requirement, I kind of want to know, how do the offices work together so that we know that the county stays in compliance with these reporting standards? Hancock, you're up.
Okay, well, I guess, I mean, as an auditor, I'm going to say we're always in compliance because we know the laws that govern our office and payroll laws that we work with. So are you just talking about the 600 thing in general?
Mm-hmm. Just the reporting
part. It's all run through payroll. So obviously we're going to follow that process all the way through, just like we normally do.
Okay.
Yeah, for any employee.
All right. What about
since those reporting requirements fall more on the auditor than the clerk, then that's more an issue for the auditor's office, in my view.
I will say that Lisa and I are in, or Lisa and my payroll clerk are in constant contact throughout the whole process of the election polls, from when she's getting them started and she's sending them through. And so there's a couple of, you know, checks and balances that they go through before we even get them added to payroll or reactivate them if they're returning. So, I mean, as far as the reporting though, it's just going to be our regular reporting that we do for payroll.
Okay. What about you, Emily?
I mean, it really does kind of follow what we do normally for the reporting. And I feel like at the end of the fall election, we do kind of take an internal audit of the workers and kind of just to make sure everybody falls in where they should. And normally they do. They always have. But nothing special.
Okay. Well, if Rachel and Bernadette are there.
Same thing. We just follow that's why we use the $600 mark when she's going through her list in the beginning.
Okay. And if you know any counties who have actually went kind of IRS audit, they will tell you this is extremely important. Okay.
Ricky, are you is there some other reporting that we're not commenting on that you think that we?
No, I think just talking about W-2s is really what I was kind of pushing us towards there.
That.
Okay. I do have a question that came in here, and again, this could be for anybody who wants to answer. Okay, if you put a if you put all poll workers on payroll and end up owing them a refund, how do you deal with that regarding the IRS payments that you made to them for those employees? And who is responsible to determine who made over $600? Good question.
The voucher would determine who, I mean, we don't know how many hours worked unless we're told, right? So the voucher would determine how many hours they worked and what we're paying them for. But with Hancock County is a little bit bigger, I think, than a lot of the other counties. And I think that there's very few of ours that make under 600. And I don't know that we've ever had to do a refund.
Okay. Okay. But
We've never
if you,
had to.
so at the end of the year, do you guys do any kind of review just to make sure that nothing has changed throughout that year? You know, could you, if you do that kind of review, can you kind of share that process? Because I'm thinking this is probably something that's done in the auditor's office, not the clerk's office. And the reason I say that is the auditor has the ledger that has all the payments made to those individuals. The clerk wouldn't have that readily available. So really, the responsibility of determining who made over that is probably going to go more onto the auditor because they have those records. So just kind of curious of what you guys do at the end, just to make sure that everybody kind of stays within the range you originally thought they were.
Okay, well, I'm going to have Sherry answer that for you.
Okay.
Sherry Cole, my payroll clerk.
So I haven't actually physically been through this process myself because I'm newer to the role, but we do an internal audit and check all these things to make sure if we owe somebody back or not. And then, of course, we would communicate with Lisa's office, let her know what was happening.
Right, if anything changed.
Right, if anything changed. Yes.
Okay. What about?
Thank you.
We appreciate you coming in and talking to us.
Thank you.
What about Emily? What do you guys do at the end of the year? Do you guys run some kind of reports? Do you, what kind of controls do you have in place to make sure that, you know, where you've set people originally, your original assessment of where you think they are is where they either stayed or if they maybe made over the $600? Do you have a process for that?
Yeah, and we probably have a shorter list than some other counties, but AP will go through and kind of check a list of poll workers, and then payroll will do the same. But it's not an overwhelming amount of people.
Okay.
They kind of know the list of names, and they'll go through and check those.
Okay. Rachel, do you have anything to add?
Bernadette does.
Nope.
When I look at my list in the November election, I always compare it with the primary to make sure I didn't have somebody that only worked on election day on primary, but is working an ABS board or a satellite board on the fall, where it's going to put them over, then they would go on payroll at that point. But very seldom do we have anybody that we think is going to make over $600 and doesn't, because if you're on the ABS board, you have 28 days of, you know, early voting at $110 a day, or the satellite is 6 to 8 days, depending on the election, at $110 a day. So the only people that could possibly be under that are election day workers only.
Okay. Yeah, I was gonna get just let's come back for just a second. I was trying to read through some of these questions as we came through. Okay. Does the county have elected officials that work the polls on election day as a poll worker? If so, how do you pay them? Because you can't change an elected official's salary during the year. At least that's our understanding. I can probably answer this unless you guys want to. Okay, so you're right. Statute does specify that an elected official's compensation cannot change throughout the year, right? As for which it's set. There are a few exceptions, and one is per diem set out in statute. So if statute says that you can get a per diem for something, then that can be paid because it's not considered a change in compensation for the statute. So, you know, depending on what they're doing, you know, you may have to look it up to see if that is a per diem that's set. I mean, again, there's lots of different roles and lots of different ways to pay them, but if it is a per diem in statute, then it would be allowed to be paid. Hopefully that answered that. Okay. This question is, does an hourly rate meet the requirement for a per diem? I mean, some people use per diem as a daily rate. Some do use it as like, you know, it could be like a daily rate, or some people use it as a meeting. Like you went to a meeting and every meeting you attended, you got a per diem for just attending that thing. Some have used it for hourly. I'm not sure that statute actually really defines what per diem actually means. I mean, we think of it as a daily rate a lot of times, but if your question is whether or not that meets it, it might be something you want to talk to your county attorney about and just make sure that you're working within a statute there. Okay, a couple more. All right, so let's see. Poll workers making less than $600 do not like taxes being taken out. They have nothing left, and we lose ABS poll workers because of the payroll process. Again, I get that. I totally understand that for some counties. I think that's more of a problem with some counties and not with other counties as I'm hearing through this. So again, that process might not work for your county. We're not telling you that, again, this is not a one size fits all. Some of them run things through payroll, some do not. So if that's a really big concern happening, this is where you need to get with your auditor and sit with them, talk to them. What can we do in order to make it a place where we would, you know, hopefully get more people that want to sign up to do it. But you've got to take at it from all angles, right? Because we want to make sure that the county doesn't have, you know, requirements on their end that they have to fill too in order. So again, just have that communication, I think, with your auditor and see if you can't figure out a process that might better suit those kinds of needs. Okay. All right, so basically, if you send a poll worker a 1099 through AP because they made over $600, then you did it wrong. Well, if they made over $600, they should receive a W-2. Okay. Sorry, there's a lot of questions, and I just want to make sure I'm not missing anybody. I think I moved too far.
So if election workers are considered employees to the same role that is applied.
Oh, all right. So, okay. So if election workers are considered employees, does the same rule of nepotism apply? So could the clerk of the county hire their child or sibling to work as a poll worker? Gosh, now you're starting to get into legal things. And I don't know if y'all know this, but I'm an accountant. So statute is very specific on nepotism. And it does talk about direct line of supervision. So you need to work real carefully there on who you're hiring. I think if the clerk was hiring their child and they were directly supervising them, I think it's going to be a problem, but you might need to talk to the attorney, the county attorney, about it and make sure. The other thing is even though, you know, statute's got its nepotism, but there's also, the county can also has their own nepotism policy that can have stricter guidelines than what the statute has in it. So you would need to make sure that you look at both of those to make sure that you're in compliance with both. Okay. All right, so let's see.
For the general election, if you find someone wasn't supposed to make over 600 and was paid with claims and things like that.
Yeah. Oh, that's okay. So this next question is one of those things that we'd like for you to avoid happening, right? And this question is, what do you do after a general election if you find someone wasn't supposed to make over $600 and was paid through claims and ended up making over $600? I think that's why some people choose to do it through payroll, because if they're running it through payroll, it's easier to refund the individual than trying to go back to the individual and say, hey, we need to take, we need to report this and we need to do this. So that answered it. Do you guys want to add to that?
That's exactly what was happening with the early voting and the more and more poll workers that we were having. It was creating an issue with running it through AP, and that's the very issue it was creating. So, not to any great magnitude or anything like that, but more and more days that people are working, they're going to earn more money. And so this is why we decided to go through payroll. Exactly.
Okay. I do have this. So this is a good question. And again, this is for you guys. If a county is paying an election worker through payroll and not claims, do you require the election worker to get a background check along with drug testing before the start date? Now, so Hancock does not.
No.
What about Jay?
No, we do not.
Okay. Stark said no too. They just they just chatted it. No. So Stark does not either. Which makes sense, right? They're wanting to know if questions and answers will be available to print off after this meeting for review. I'm going to try. I will be completely honest with you. I am running this through a browser instead of through the actual application because my computer does not like the application. And so I'm not 100% sure what all saves through this. I'm thinking the same thing that does it through the application. So if I can find this, we will create something and maybe try and get it out in a bulletin. The only problem is it's probably not going to be this bulletin. It'd probably be the next bulletin. But I will try my best to get you something, okay? All right. How do you address election workers not completing the required paperwork prior to working? This would be you guys. What do you, is there any time that you have somebody who wants to do an election, but they haven't, filled out any of like maybe a W-9 or any of that stuff? Or they don't have a problem. Their people all fill out the paperwork.
Can you repeat the question again, Ricky?
Yes. How do you address election workers not completing the required paperwork prior to working?
They either don't work or we kind of let them know that we need that before we can process their payment.
But you don't seem to have an issue with, for the most part. That's
No, it hasn't been a problem, and especially since we have payroll at our training meetings, then everyone is there. Our poll workers have not had an issue with this process. I haven't heard any complaints at all. So, we just haven't had any issues. And there have been a couple times where we've had to make a couple extra phone calls to get the paperwork, but everyone's has complied and it hasn't been an issue.
And so probably having, like you said, the training and having everybody there together while they're all in a room really probably helps make that be less of an issue, right? Because they're doing all the things they need to do before they go and start to work.
And Lisa sends that packet out to her list of workers before the training session. So when they're coming in and with instructions to bring it filled out to the training. Okay. So they bring that filled out. Payroll is there looking through everything to make sure they have it. So they haven't even gotten their training before they've worked. So that's not an issue at getting any kind of paperwork because we're just doing training at that point in time.
Okay. Anybody else want to add to that before I?
Yeah, I'll let Bernadette tell what she does during her trainings.
And during training, I give everybody a little index note card, and they have to fill in their name, address, phone number, email, but I tell them only put your email down as if you use your email. But if they don't turn in those cards with that information, they don't even get paid. So they could work an election day and not turn in their card. Well, you didn't turn your card in. Like when you first come in the door, that's what I do. And I explain it to everyone. So if they don't turn in their card, they don't get paid.
Okay. I think I am down here to, okay. What kind of paperwork do you guys require for an election worker if you have make the assessment that they're going to make less than $600 for the whole year? What kind of paperwork do you have them fill out?
All we require here in Stark is that note card, and that's from the clerk because I want to make sure I have everybody's good contact information. If they don't show up on election day, I want to be able to get a hold of them, make sure they're okay, not in a crash on their way there, whatever it happens to be. So that's the biggest reason for the note card, but that's the only thing I require if they make less than $600.
Okay. All right. What about?
I'd have to do a W-9.
Okay.
A W-9.
Yeah, we do a W-9 for any workers who we know. Like we have our splicers on election day that are just paid $50. We have receive team, our provisional team that are all going to make less than that. So they do the W-9 and it's submitted by claim.
And we do not make them do a new W-9 each year. I think that was a question earlier.
You guys said you
So
kept
we
separate
don't.
files so that they didn't have to redo the paperwork, which is actually very nice and handy, and I'm sure they appreciate that.
Well, and it's the same with Bernadette, the card, we have a sheet for returning workers and they do have to sign off that, their banking information hasn't changed. Their address has not been updated since the last time they worked. So they do fill out that form and that's provided to the claims department.
Okay. Well, Rachel and Bernadette did a little bit differently. What do you guys do, guys?
I didn't want to talk. I just put it in the chat.
I know.
We don't W-9 if it's under 600 because we're not going to be. They're not going to get 1099. So I don't know. We don't do a W-9. Maybe we should. I don't know. Maybe I'm doing that wrong.
Well, you're running it. The reason I wanted you to say it is because Hancock's running all of theirs through payroll. You're not. And we're not saying that it all has to go through payroll. We're telling you that each county needs to sit down and decide what's the best way for that county to proceed. There are multiple ways to do this and still be in compliance. So I really wanted you to say that because it is a little bit different than the way, Hancock and stuff does it. So even though you didn't want to talk.
I will say that we request everybody do a W-9 just as an internal control so that we don't miss anybody that needs to have one submitted. So that's kind of something that we've done for all of our vendors and everyone. We just make sure that we have that on file before we pay anyone.
Okay. I'm just kind of going through the top of the questions because I did skip a couple thinking we were going to talk about them. We did that one. I just want to make sure we're not trying not to miss anybody. There's been a little bit of chat in between. Okay. I think I have everybody. I think I've hit everybody. If I didn't overlook you on purpose. My screen's about this big, so I'm trying to go through it. I do have one additional question, and we are kind of coming towards the end. We've got about 12 minutes left of this. And I think this could be expanded by each one of our counties who have joined today. The questions that I have for you guys is, as we're going into this new election year, right? Primaries are coming up. What recommendations do you guys have for the other counties when working to create the cooperative policies and procedures that work so well for you? And Deb and Lisa, you're up.
Well, when we discussed this a few years ago and made some updates to the policy, we just put together, we just put it in writing. It's not like an MOU or an SOP, but we just put it in writing, kind of an email between the two of us, so that if there are questions from my election office or questions from per departments, then we can always refer back to that. And, it went back and forth between us a couple of times with some updates, but we finally got it settled. And so we just have those notes that we refer back to from time to time.
And we leave it on the table that if anything changes or we have any questions or we think that we need to revisit something, we will. So that's always on the table for us to revisit a process and change it if it needs to be changed.
And part of the reason too, I think that we decided not to do like a MOU is because Deb and I aren't going to be here forever. There's going to be a new auditor and a new clerk at some point, and they may have differing opinions on on the processes that we've put in place.
Okay. I like that. I like the idea of having something kind of written, to follow that. That's very helpful. All right. What about John and Emily? What are your recommendations, things that work for you on making these cooperative policies and procedures?
Go ahead. We just actually, the communication, like I mentioned earlier, is of utmost importance. And anything that we have question about, we talk about with one another, or I talk to her claims or her payroll person, and we just go from there. Great relationship is very important as well. And I'm very blessed in my county to have that with my auditor.
I know, and I'm like, and maybe we should put something in writing since John's leaving, but hopefully Missy gets it. But yeah. I mean, that might be something that we should look at too, is putting something in writing. And I know as your fees go up, we might have to revisit kind of what works for us or what doesn't work for us.
With this day and age that we're living in, is there any talk about that $600 threshold being raised?
Well, that's an IRS thing, so I can't really speak to that. I haven't heard anything, but that doesn't mean it's not been talked about either.
It hasn't, based on the day and age we're living in and the way things have changed.
Yeah.
So, sure. But I think Emily.
I think he cut out on us. Yeah, John, I think you're gone or you're cutting out on us. I can't hear you anymore. While he's doing that, Rachel, Bernadette, do you have any recommendations?
So besides going to Mexico Lindo at night? Sorry. No, communication. That's it. I mean,
we have any questions, if I have questions, I pick up the phone and call her. And we've not always agreed on everything. We are both different people. We have different opinions on things, and we come to some type of agreement that we both can live with, and we just move on.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yep. Well, I know that we will always recommend having it in writing, if you can. I mean, any policies you have, to have them in writing. Just helps everybody know what their part is and what they have to do. It also helps when there's a change in office that this is how it was done. Doesn't mean it can't change, right? Because even when you have new auditors and new clerks, sometimes those need to be reevaluated because the old way maybe needs to be updated, right? Things change, processes change. I know even here within, State Board of Accounts, we do internal things and we have those written down so that we all know what part we play in the order. Sometimes it's a timeline. Sometimes it's who's responsible for what. Those are just really good things to have so that there aren't questions. Or if there are questions, you bring somebody new into a role, you can say, hey, here's the policy that we normally follow so that they can kind of see where they fit inside that policy as well. So we would always recommend that. As we move forward. I must have skipped one question as we were going through here. And so I do apologize for that. Okay. It was the question that she has is if you refund the FICA taxes to, you're saying employee, and I want to change that because it would be really somebody who made under $600 for the year that wasn't an employee, right? I mean, because you wouldn't be refunding FICA from somebody who made over $600 if they were an employee, right? Because they've already met that threshold. So I'm going to kind of refund your question a little bit there, or refund it. Sorry, guys. Rephrase it a little bit. So refunding FICA taxes that are taken out from somebody who has made under $600 for the year. How would you, the county would then be due a refund from the IRS. I believe they would. The question is, how do you go about that process? I am honestly not 100% sure what the process is to get some kind of refund from the IRS. There's got to be a contact out there that you would meet. I mean, if you overpaid any kind of tax. Is there any auditor here that wants to speak to that?
I will say that it's very difficult to get the refund from the IRS, but I've not had to do this, so I don't feel comfortable speaking on it. But it's definitely a question that we've been eyeballing this whole time, and we've made some notes to see what we can find out about that.
Somebody said they believe that it's part of the 941 quarterly, and that might be, again, I'm not 100% sure because it is IRS, and I would probably agree with Deb. It's probably hard to get a refund, but you do different reports and things like that. So there might be something there that would allow you to do it. Again, it's more of an IRS question than it is really us. I think. Somebody uses a 941X report to get the refund. So that's a thought too. Okay, I'm going to take this last question here. And the question was, we said the threshold was 2,300, not 600. The threshold for FICA. So anything under the 2,300 wouldn't have to take Social Security and Medicare out on it, is what we were talking about. Anything once you hit above that, it would. Are you talking about like the state income taxes? Is that what she's? Yes. So I'm going to see, So I'm going to go back to my slide here. When we talk about like the state income taxes, any election work that's done are not subject to the income tax withholding. And that was on my slide, maybe 7. I'll make this available for you guys as well when we do the reporting. Okay. I'm going to put up one last thing. I hope this was a really good session. I hope that it kind of like helps people see, other counties, how they're processing things. I put up our contact information for you to see here. Again, we want this to be an ongoing conversation, moving towards that. We understand that both the auditor and the clerk, your job responsibilities are a lot. You've got the auditor who's taking care of the finances for the whole county, reporting, payroll, those kinds of things. But you got to remember, you got your clerk over here who's also doing accounting thing for fees, taking care of the courts, running the elections. Those are big jobs, right, on both sides. So we want to, recommend everybody kind of work together. If you can come to the table with your clerk, your auditor, sit down together and work out what works best for your county. Again, it's not a one size fits all. It can't be. Counties are different sizes. You have different amounts of people who are working some elections in some counties. Again, if it's a bigger counties, probably bigger, right, than some of your smaller counties. But we want to use this opportunity to start opening these conversations, looking at how other counties did it. We tried to pick different size counties for you guys to see, and ones that work together, and we're willing to come here and talk to everybody. So we do need to, they were in the room, I would give them a round of applause. We appreciate you guys volunteering. We hope, again, to do this again after the primary. We'd like for you to take away take the information from this, try to implement some stuff. Maybe you come up with something great that works that you think will work across counties. Email us. Like, we always want to hear that. But we also want to hear what's not working or questions. Maybe there's something, your guys are coming to the table and each has maybe a little bit of a different understanding. Like, let's just do a group email. Let's talk about it. Okay. So that everybody's on the same page. again, we hope you enjoyed this. I think we're just about out of time for today. And if there were any, I think some stuff came in. Stacy's telling me of some questions. So we'll try and abstract those and see if we can get some answers to some of that as well. But again, we do appreciate everybody for joining today, and hope that you guys have a really great afternoon and a very good primary election that works smoothly.
Thank you so much to State Board of Accounts for putting this together. We appreciate it.
Well, we appreciate everybody. Both associations worked with us really well for this. So we look forward to continuing those relationships, and we'll talk to you guys all soon. Okay? Have a great day, guys.